Of all the questions I get about bonsai, the most frequent one I get is about watering. How often and how much? And my answer is usually, well, it depends. Because it depends on the type of tree that you're dealing with, the climate that you're living in, the conditions that the tree's kept in, how deep the pot is, and the list goes on and on. But the best way to get used to knowing when a tree needs to be watered is to actually look at the foliage. It's going to take a little bit of time for you to get used to it, especially if it's a new species for you to deal with. Certain trees like to be wet, some like to be just moist, and others like to actually be dry in between waterings. So you got to learn the species of your tree to help you to establish a good watering system. Generally, the foliage is going to show you if it's getting too much water. Your leaves are going to start to fall, they'll start to turn yellowish, and that's going to give you a pretty good indication that something's not quite right, either too little or too much water. It's a pretty good balance on again, what the tree is going to require. A simple test for a water that just takes normal watering is just simply push your finger into the soil. If it comes out feeling damp, a little bit of moisture, your tree is fine. And what I usually tell people is get used to how heavy your pot is. You know, on a tree that's large like this, you're not going to be able to move the pot around that often. But for a smaller tree, if you just simply lift the pot, you'll know. You know, a heavier tree, you can tell that water, because when the trees are dried out totally, they're very light, and there's a big difference between the weights. So kind of get used to that as the telltale signs if your tree needs to be watered. I've put together a little demonstration I want to show you because once you water the tree, a lot of people think that the water just runs out the bottom and it doesn't really sit in the pot. But I've put something together to kind of show you exactly how much water stays in the pot, again, on what kind of soil you're using and the depth of the pot. So here, take a look at this. Okay, so for this demonstration, what I did is I just took a plastic bonsai pot, cut it in half, left one drain hole, wired it in like I normally do with the mesh, and then put a simple piece of plastic on the front so that you can see in to see where the water level sits. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a demonstration with two different soils. I'm going to do one with my basic soil mix, which is pretty much just a turfus and some pine bark, and just fill up the normal levels, which gives you a nice side view of what's actually in the pot. I'd say this pot is probably about 2 inches deep, and that's probably about 2.5 ounces of soil. So I'm going to add some water now. I'm going to water it like I normally do until the water drains out the drain hole. And you can see there it is, the water's draining out. And we'll just wait till that finishes draining. But what you can also see is there's a little line of water that doesn't drain out completely, and that's because of the specific gravity or the water table generated by this bonsai pot. Just like a wet sponge, you know, if you put a sponge on the counter, if you let it sit, it'll drain out enough. But if you tilt it sideways, sometimes a little bit more water will come out, and that's the same thing that's going to happen with the bonsai pot. They don't drain completely, and they hold quite a bit of water. The weight of this has gone up dramatically, and you can see how much water I can actually shake out of this thing. So that's the basic soil mix. Now the basic soil mix is going to hold a lot more moisture because it's a tighter grit and a smaller grit, so it's going to hold a lot of contact to contact with the particulates of the soil. So there's not as much air in there, so it's going to hold a lot more moisture. Now let me try this again, same experiment, but this time I'm going to use the larger mix. And again, we're just going to fill it up to the top. All the way there. Okay. And one more time, I'm just going to add a little, the water until it starts to drain out the bottom, just like before. And again, the weight of this as I'm holding it is incredible. You can see how the water is draining out steady until it gets down to a certain level, and then it starts to trickle off a little bit, but still maintains quite a bit of water in there. And there you go. And it's drained out completely. But again, if you tilt it or shake it, there's still a lot of water that's being held by that pot. So even though you think that the pots or the soil is draining out completely and your plants need watered, keep in mind there's a lot of water that stays in that pot, and there's also a lot of water that's held in each of the grains of the lava rock in this case that have a lot of areas to hold moisture. This has gone up probably double in weight, and still I can still shake out this much more water. So keep in mind when you're watering, check the soil line to make sure that it needs to be watered. Look at the foliage of the tree to give you any indications that you might need to do some watering or to slow down the watering. And again, keep in mind the depth of the pot and how often you water, because these pots hold quite a bit. Hope that helps you.